Now it stopped working. Oh, there we go. Maybe. So the computer for the changers back here, but now, Deborah, it's not working. So just to go over the agenda for today, what we are going to do is introduction. So I am Jonathan Seyferth. I'm the city manager for the city of Muskegon. We also have in the audience several staff members. We've got Kim Young, who greeted you as you came in the front door. We've got Deborah Sweet over here, and we've got Cassie around here. Oh, Cassie's right here in the front. So the staff is wearing the same teal-colored shirts. So if you need something during the presentation or have a question, they would be one of the ones to get a hold of. We also have several commissioners in the audience. Commissioner Kilgo from Ward 1, Commissioner German from Ward 2 is over here. And I don't believe I saw any other commissioners here tonight. Oh, Commissioner Coaching, I didn't see you sneak in. I was expecting, but I apologize, I did not see you. We got Commissioner Coaching from Ward 4. We also have Chuck Canestrait and Max McKee from Sam Products here in the front, who might be able to help pinch in some questions if I'm not able to answer them as well. The rules of engagement, okay. What is going on here? There we go. Is to be respectful and to stay on topic as we go through this question and answer session. Please no personal attacks or inappropriate off-topic posts. Those will be removed. So we are using Slido for those who are using your data on your phone. You can put a question into the question app that way, and that will get loaded in. They'll show up on the screen, and we can answer them from there. If you're not able to get on the app, or it's actually a website, not an app, that you can write your question down, and one of our staff members will be able to collect that. That will get added into the Slido app so that it appears on the screen. You also have the option to upvote on things as well. Please keep the questions brief and one main idea per question. We're going to answer as many of these questions as we can. One of the reasons that we're using this platform is if we can't get through all of the questions, we will follow up afterwards with additional answers that we're not able to get to tonight, because we will be ending the session promptly at 8 p.m. Next slide. So for the Q&A participation, and I already talked about this a little bit, if you are able to access the Slido site, you can also upvote questions. So if there's a question that you see on the board that you want answered, you can like that, and that will get more likes on there that we can see to make sure that we get to those questions. And like I said, if you don't have a phone, no problem. We do have paper as well, and you can fill out those multiple times if you have more than one question. Now we're going to do an icebreaker. We're going to see if this is going to work or not, depending on some of the data. We are working on trying to get the Wi-Fi in here fixed, but this is the QR code that you can scan, which will take you to the Slido website, and there is a question. I'll give everyone a minute to do that if you would like. Or the other option is, if the QR code's not working for you, if your camera can't pick it up, you can go to slido.com in your browser, and when you pull up that website, there'll be a box in the upper part of the screen, and you can type in that code 1520995, and it'll bring you to the same spot. So there's two different ways to get to the Slido page. Still see a couple people have their phones up. And again, if this doesn't work, there are paper questions that you can fill out. So, join the quiz. What year was the city of Muskegon founded is the question. And then these are the folks who are jumping on. Give it another second here. Oh, the Wi-Fi is good? Oh, awesome, cool. So I will put up, I was just told the Wi-Fi is good to go. So I am going to put up the slide that has the guest Wi-Fi stuff. Deborah, did you take that off the? Okay, so all lowercase? Okay, so choose MPS is the Wi-Fi password for the MPS guest network. So if you pull up the MPS guest network on your phone and join that, choose MPS is the password. And you can still scan that QR code to jump into Slido. So I'll give everybody another minute now that we've got the technology. Thank you to the tech people and the end of the city, the school district for hosting us today. We don't have rooms quite this big at City Hall, so it's nice to give folks some breathing room and to be able to do this in this setting. Okay, so the question was, in what year was the city of Muskegon founded? So you got 20 seconds to answer it. You've got these three options. And at the end, I'll click over and see how we're doing with there. Okay, 1869 is the correct answer, and over half the group got that right, so great job. And then we're going to go on to the next question here, which is, in part of the McLaughlin neighborhood, the streets were named in a unique way. How are the streets named? I had to think about this one, and I guessed, and I got it right. I think it was just because I had a 25% chance of getting it right. But, so. And it's the answer is they were named after grapes. So trees and flowers, that was close, but they were named after grapes. And I think that we got that from one of our team members. I'm guessing Jamie. Yeah. So for those of you who know Jamie Pesh, that's very on brand for Jamie, having that answer there. So yeah. So now that we know that it's at least working for some of you, I know at least Deborah's helping one person right now get on. If we need to go back to get the QR code, we can do that. So we're going to move. We're going to move into the presentation and just talk about the what we have before us, before the commission in November, and what it is that we're going to be talking about and taking questions and answers on tonight. So the goal for this presentation is to do a high-level overview of the project and the properties involved. This is mainly going to be photos and videos and maps. There's not going to be a whole ton of words in this presentation. Our team removed as much of the jargon as possible, which means they didn't let me put the presentation together. They took what I've done in the past and made it easier for everyone to understand, and took out a lot of the words that sometimes I use that might be a little too big. So thank you for my coworkers in helping me with that. And in fact, to make sure that I don't use the big words, Deborah will buzz me if I do. So we'll pop in and out of Slido questions for the engagement portion, and we will stay to the 20 minutes for the presentation and move into questions. So the most popular topic that we're going to be discussing is Fisherman's Landing. And looking at this image today, this is what Fisherman's Landing looks like. This is just to kind of give a geographical reference for the areas that we're talking about. We've got Muskegon Lake, obviously here on the left-hand side of the slide. We have the bike trail here on the right, Moses Jones Parkway, the Causeway, and Business 31. And then Fisherman's Landing here with the campground, the launch ramps, and the parking areas. The campground itself is a pay-to-use campground. So for folks who are camping there, that is a fee-based structure. So if you're not paying to go there, you're not able to go there unless you have friends who are there as well. We also have the launch ramps, the fish cleaning station, which is here in the office building, bathrooms down here by the bike trail, kayak launches, things of that nature. So this is a map showing Fisherman's Landing and the property as the city owns it today. The campground is in this portion of that parcel. And from the beginning of talking about this proposal, we've noted that the campground and portions of the parking area would be purchased by the Mart Dock. And that would end up looking like this. So the Mart Dock would purchase a portion of the Fisherman's Landing property from us to use for port operations in the future. It should also be noted that at the beginning of the transaction, this would be a lease that they would have the option to transfer into a purchase after 2028. So Fisherman's Landing changes. Some of the things that we're looking at for Fisherman's Landing would be the gated campground and gated fishing area would be closed, and about 48 parking spots would be permanently lost. There would be another 24 which would be flexible. So that is of those 5 bays that we saw in one of the previous photos, and you'll see again in a moment, it's the ones that are closest to the campsite itself. Many of the free amenities will remain in their current location, and some of them will change in their location. So going back and looking at this map, the parking spots that would be lost is this bay of parking that's directly adjacent to the campground. The fence is right here in this tree line. That flexible area would be this portion of that second bay of parking. And that just depends on some of the operational things that would be going on as things logistically come in and out. So if you were to look at a line roughly here, that's the property area that we're talking about. That does impact the pavilion, which that would end up being moved over here at the end of the berth. So this is, again, that bird's eye view where we looked at those options that would be changing there. This is the only public part of the property that would be sold in this proposal. The remainder would continue to be publicly accessible and publicly owned. It should also be noted that the vast majority of the public who uses Fisherman's Landing use this area in the launch ramp in these parking areas. Up next is going to be an interactive Slido slide. So get ready. What will the community gain from the sale of the campground portion of Fisherman's Landing? So looking at this, select all that apply. And the bottom option is all of the above. So more than double the amount of public waterfront on Muskegon Lake, build new housing, public access trails at Verplank, and then there would be redevelopment of Mart Dock, nature preserve on the city's east side, restore the area where the south branch of the Muskegon River meets Muskegon Lake, protect wetland areas, support new jobs and businesses in the city, take care of historic ships such as the Silversides and the LST, and then all of the above. So the new housing and public spaces would specifically be something that we would see over time in the downtown area. The trails would be at the Verplank property specifically. So just a couple more seconds on that one. We needed music under that. This is what we needed. Didn't think about that part of it. So the answer is all of the above. So if you selected any of these, all of these would be benefits that would occur as a result of the sale. And Cassie Cassie got it correct. So, what did we do there? Oh, sorry, went the wrong way. Okay, so the community benefits that we would gain from this sale. So how are we going to do that? What are we going to do to get there? As far as more than doubling the amount of public access to the waterfront, creating new businesses, nature preserves, things of that nature. How are we going to get to that point? Now we're going to start talking about the Verplank property, which is directly to the northeast of Fisherman's Landing itself. So we're going to return to this map, which is a zoomed out view a little bit of where the Fisherman's Landing property is. And this will look at the Verplank property as well. Most of this right now at this point, as most of you know, is vacant property. There is a communication tower on it, kind of on the west end, but it's mainly vacant, and you can see it as you go up the bike trail or if you're in the parking lot at Fisherman's Landing. And then if we navigate back to the image of Fisherman's Landing, this is the property in question here. Mostly just open space right now along the south branch of the river and then the frontage of Muskegon Lake. And now we're going to take a drone footage of that space. So this is just to orientate you. This is Richards Park. This is the causeway as we're rotating through the old Cobb property, which is now also owned by Verplank, south branch of the Muskegon River, as we're coming around on to looking at Muskegon Lake, and then the Verplank property itself here with Fisherman's Landing, and then the salt docks, and then downtown beyond. So this is the property that we're talking about now when we talk about Verplank. Again, taking a zoom back out, looking at those property, all of that piece of giant green space, about 25 acres of that, the city would purchase with funds from the sale of Fisherman's Landing. A big chunk of the Verplank property along Muskegon Lake and the Muskegon River is what the city would acquire. And at the end of the property acquisition for the east side of the city, this is what the city ownership would look like. With our areas in, well, here it looks more gray than teal, but this area down here, Fisherman's Landing, this is where the launch ramps are, this is where the office is and the fish cleaning station and the bathrooms and things of that nature. And then this area would become a public park, publicly accessible area along the south branch of the river and this stretch of Muskegon Lake. The balance of the Verplank property, and this isn't exactly the right proportions, but the balance of the Verplank property would be acquired by MartDoc. They have a purchase agreement with Verplank at this point in time for the whole acreage here, but they would add this into their port operations area, and then this is the campground area. So what would that area look like for the city? As we begin to look at how that could develop over time, we have a really great example of what this can look like on the north side of Muskegon Lake at the north branch of the Muskegon River in North Muskegon at the nature preserve there. Our objective would be, and this is a photo from that nature preserve looking back into the area towards where the parking is. Our objective would be to create something similar on the south side of the lake where residents in the city of Muskegon and folks who are using the bike trail could access a similar type property on that side of the lake. So focusing on the community benefits from what we were just looking at, it specifically looks at options 3, 4, and 5 here, where it creates a nature preserve on the city's east side. It restores an area of the south branch of the Muskegon River near Muskegon Lake. This river restoration project is something that's been on the to-do list of the Muskegon Lake Watershed Partnership and has been a desire of the greater community the whole time that we've been going through the delisting process, which we just came off the areas of concern list recently, and this would continue that work that we're doing there. This would also protect wetlands. So there's 25 acres that the city would acquire in this area, and through the river mouth restoration and other work that would be done in that area from an environmental perspective, it would help to enhance and protect wetlands in that area. Now we're gonna take a zoom out and go down to downtown. And if you're like me and you walk around our downtown and you get to the corner of 3rd and Western and you look north up Muskegon Lake, you get this really cool view, a view shed that looks out into Muskegon Lake up the 3rd Street Wharf. And it really kind of draws you in. And what our objective here is that with the purchase of the 3rd Street Wharf property from MartDoc, we would allow that to become publicly accessible and an asset for everyone to enjoy in the downtown. And this is an example of a project that was done similarly. I've shown this in other presentations. It's City Deck in Green Bay, Wisconsin, along the Black River. And this is the kind of thing that we want to be able to encourage people to get down to the water and enjoy as we are continuing to develop our downtown and ensuring that we have public access. And if you haven't ever stood in that area or wondering what that looks like, this next slide is a video going from Together Muskegon Rising north up 3rd Street to the 3rd Street Wharf property. So what we're talking about in this instance is this area here would become public, as well as the head of the wharf area, and that would connect into the Terrace Point pier that's here already. So you would be able to have that all the way from downtown. And really, if from where we're sitting here at Muskegon High School, if you walked out the back and went past the football field and up 3rd Street, it's about a mile walk, and then you would be here at the end of the 3rd Street Pier. This is the current ownership situation for the 3rd Street area. This is what the city currently controls. So this is a driveway area. There's a small parking lot, and then the Terrace Point Pier that folks are able to access at this point. This property also shows the MartDoc ownership here, which is properties that we're pretty familiar with. Anytime you're driving up and down Shoreline Drive, you got the LST here. Folks use this for parking for events. We have the Aquastar that's docked here as well. And doing this deal would allow them to move their port operations that occur on this side of the property over to Fisherman's Landing and allow that area to be redeveloped over time. And this is something that we've really been talking about in the city since the 1990s. It's something that really started actually a couple years before that in the late 80s, as we looked at rezoning MartDoc and looking at how to move port operations to another area. So if the agreement was to go forward, what you end up with in the downtown is an area that looks like this, where you can continue the 3rd Street area up, and you've got the head of the 3rd Street Wharf, and that connects into the Terrace Road and the Terrace Point Pier. Excuse me for 1 second. And so this is a photo of that same area that we just did the aerial of. So again, this would be what we would end up getting that would become publicly accessible. And then this is the area that over time would be redeveloped once port operations move to the other location. This is another view of MartDoc. This is what you might see from the water if you're coming back on the Aquastar, or if you're standing at AWRI at their dock looking across over to MartDoc. So let's take a step back again and look at these properties all together now that we've talked about them. We've got the MartDoc area with the Terrace Point Pier and driveway that the city controls, Fisherman's Landing, launch ramp and campground, and the Verplank property. And then if the agreement was to go forward, this would be the new state of city ownership and property ownership in the downtown. I do want to note that this area on the MartDoc, they would continue to own, but it would be redeveloped over time. The city would gain this area and this area. So going back and forth between the two slides, what that looks like from the city's perspective on what we would gain access to. And what does that look like in sheer numbers? Currently, the city owns about 2,390 feet of frontage on Muskegon Lake. It's inclusive of the campground, which is behind a fence, and then that's also the Terrace Point Pier. With the proposal that I just showed you between the two maps, that would increase to just under 5,000 feet of frontage, and that's all of that area on the Verplank property that we would have along the lake, and then the additional frontage along the 3rd Street area. So that's a 107% increase in the amount of property that the city would own on Muskegon Lake. Our acreage would also increase by 63% from 22 acres to 36 acres. Again, that's a very substantial increase in the amount of acreage that we would get in this deal, and also keeping in mind that the acreage at the campground is not generally publicly accessible and is behind a fence. So when we go back to what the community benefits are, we can see how we would achieve all of these things. Doubling the amount of waterfront, being able to have the redevelopment occur at both Mart Dock and Verplank, the nature preserve area, the restoring of the south branch of the river, protecting wetlands, and it also allows us to create new jobs and businesses in the city. Grand Valley did a study a number of years ago on the economic impact under a contract with GMED, the Greater Muskegon Economic Development Office, and found that over time, the total number of jobs and investments would be in the well over $10 million a year as far as jobs go once everything is up and operational there. And this also allows us to take care of our historic ships. Our LST is obviously docked there already. The Silver Sides has been in conversation with the LST about the possibility of those two ships coming together. That's a decision of the Silver Sides if they wish to do anything on with that, but this would allow us to accommodate them as well and create some synergy there between those two ships. So now we are going to be getting into the question and answer session. So if you need to scan the Slido code, again, you can do that here, or again, you can go to slido.com, type in the code 1520995, and put your questions in there. And again, you can like the questions, which will show us which ones people are most interested in hearing answers to. I do want to note that the way that the questions work, so if you enter a question into Slido, the staff does have to release it into the queue. And if there's any vulgar language or anything like that, they're not going to put those questions in. But other questions will just get moved right over. They don't have the ability to edit any of the questions. They only have the ability to release the questions. If you're writing your questions down, there is an orange flag in the back on your left-hand side of the room, my right-hand side of the room, and you can go drop those off over there. So, what developers have firmly committed to building this new housing, and for which economic group is this housing to be built? So the redevelopment of the Mart Dock is something that would occur a number of years down the road, and it would be subject to what's called a PUD, a planned unit development. And those type of details as far as what type of housing would be there, whether it's mixed use, is it condos, is it apartments, things of that nature, would be handled through the PUD process that the City Planning Commission and City Commission would need to approve. But there have been renderings out in the community for over a year now of some of the layout of a proposed layout that you could have in that space, which would have a variety of different mixed uses in there at that site. Ooh. What'd I do, Deborah? Okay. So there we go. Okay. So go to the top one from Sarah. And actually, I am going to turn this mic on so I can walk around. Okay, that's better. Is there the possibility that Muskegon would not renew the lease with Mart Dock after 2028? No, the way that the agreement is written, it starts out as a lease, so the city would own the property so that as we go for the grant process, it's a publicly owned piece of property. In 2028, the Mart Dock Corporation, or West Michigan Dock, as it's referred to in the agreement, has the right to exercise what's called a quit claim deed to own the property. So that would all be determined in the agreement at the time that it's approved. That would be their right for refusal. Mitch, why is the Verplank land insufficient for the Mart Dock plans? Why do they need the campground area. I think the most simplest way to answer that question, and I might look to Chuck to clarify a little bit if I step off wrong here, but the campground property on the slip that currently exists already has a relatively hardened wall which allows ships to come in and offload. There's a very soft shoreline along the front of the campground and along the Verplank property. The Verplank property is also in the river mouth, and so the permitting process probably wouldn't allow for hardening to occur there. You'd also have to do a lot of dredging. So logistically, it would be really difficult to use the Verplank property if you weren't able to access it through the campground property. Tim, how much money will be generated by the lease per year versus how much money does the city profit from the campground? The city doesn't profit from the campground. The campground is an independent entity. We do audit their numbers. They turn in their receipts every year. We do charge them for electric and water that's used on the site, but we don't generate any money into the city's general fund from the campground. As far as what's generated from the lease, so this would be a prepaid lease. So at the time that the lease is executed, the West Michigan Dock Company would pay the city for the lease itself, which would be a 90-plus year lease that they would be paying for, which is essentially buying the property. So it's called a lease in the agreement, but the better way to think about it is it's a property sale. So we would be getting revenue from the property sale, and there is a mechanism in there to determine how we're setting the value for that piece of property. So there's an appraisal process that we'll use for both the 3rd Street property and for the Fisherman's Landing property. And then if there's a dispute in that number, there's a setup in there on how we come to an agreement on that as well. What is the estimate of the costs of this project to the city? So there's a couple different factors at play here. The city is in receipt of a $2.8 million grant from the state of Michigan, specifically for the 3rd Street property. So we would use that grant to pay for the acquisition of that 3rd Street property. And then we would also use that grant to help pay for the some of the preservation costs or moving costs of the LST, and for improvements, public improvements to the 3rd Street area. So that would come out of that $2.8 million for that area. The West Michigan Dock Company would then pay the city. We would sell the Fisherman's Landing property to them, and we would use the proceeds from that sale to then buy our portion of the Verplank property. And then we would work with third parties to specifically for the river restoration projects to get grants to help pay for that. There will be, in the land acquisition side of things for the Verplank property, there will be a gap between what MartDock pays for the Fisherman's Landing campground portion and what the city will pay for the Verplank property, the 25 acres that we would be getting. So we would have to take that out of either public improvement funds or general fund balance, but we would need to fund that gap in some way. And then over time, we would do the improvements in that area. We do know that there are non-federal grants for river restoration work that we would be very competitive for, and that we've already been having discussions about how we would position ourselves for that. Is West Michigan Dock the only business that's allowed to operate here, and for how long? Yes, they would own the property. They would be the ones to operate there. It would be their property, just like downtown is currently their property. What we're getting in exchange for this is a long-held objective of the city, going back 30 years, to move port operations more to the east side of the lake, and expanded public access on the east side, as well as expanded public access downtown and redevelopment of the downtown waterfront. What is the estimate of the cost of this project to the city? Already went through that. Sorry, these things are bouncing around a little bit. will all properties purchased by the city be finalized before any deals are made to ensure public areas become city property in Muskegon? So that will all be worked out in the agreement as far as when the first part of this agreement would be us purchasing the Third Street property. That would be fee simple property ownership. So we would own that right from the beginning of the deal, and we would start those improvements. The acquisition of the Verplank property, that's going to take a little bit more time, but within the agreement, we have all of those details worked out on how those different options work together to ensure that we're getting that property. The other thing that we have to keep in mind is the Fisherman's Landing campground. There have been DNR dollars that have been used in that campground in the past, and so it would be entering into what's called a conversion with the state Department of Natural Resources. And so we have to be able to get comparable property that would keep us out of, or would take us out of conversion after we divest ourselves of that property. That would all be detailed through that agreement. Will all properties purchased by the city, oh, sorry, that was what we just, will there be an easement from Fisherman's Landing to the new nature preserve? Yes. So one of the things that we've talked about is along that bike trail area, there would be a way to access the nature preserve. You'd be able to access it through other areas as well off the bike trail. City staff has been looking at how do we connect it better to possibly Richards Park as well. So there would be access to the area. Sorry, that one keeps popping back up, Jeff. Can the city change the use of Fisherman's Landing after 2026, making it more accessible? Well, if the agreement goes through, the Fisherman's Landing campground would not be the city's any longer, but the lawn tramps would still remain, and we wouldn't really see any changes to that part of it. Are there governmental grants also available so MarkDOT could make the port on the property they already own without disturbing the campground? So there is what's called a Port Improvement Development Grant, a PIDP grant, that you could apply for any properties along the lake. So in theory, you would be able to do that. What this does is it allows for the consolidation of the port operations and then the redevelopment of downtown. So one of the things that we're really looking for is how are we able to redevelop that property in the downtown, which has been in our master plan, our Imagine Muskegon Lake plan, for more than 30 years now, at least in the master plan. The Imagine Muskegon Lake plan's a mid-2010s document. So that's what the objective is. In theory, could they go for a grant there? Sure. But generally, those grants are more, you're more successful in the grant when there's a public ownership in there as well. Let's see. Are there plans to add a new campground within the city and close to public use water? That is a discussion that city staff is having. Just last week, we had a pretty detailed brainstorming session about different possibilities for campgrounds on Muskegon Lake or close to Muskegon Lake. The next step in that process is that there'll be a smaller group of us that will start talking about what are the logistical possibilities of those locations that we've looked at. There's some that would be absolutely amazing, but they might not be all that accessible or might not be ready for development at this point in time, so there would be a wait there. And then there's other ones that might be a little bit further away from the water that might have some pluses and minuses as well. So we are having that discussion. The city is definitely not opposed to having a campground somewhere else in the city, and we are actively looking at what those options could be. What are the environmental concerns with this project, and how will they be addressed? So there's known environmental problems pretty much on every property that is along the lake, particularly anything that's in infill areas, which the 3rd Street area is, MarkDOT is, Fisherman's Landing is, the Verplank property is, and I could go on, and Heritage Landing is. So we do know from a pretty good baseline about what's there and looking at how you could mitigate that for the public use standpoint. And when you're looking at 3rd Street, really what we're looking at is passive recreation. A lot of that area will be hardened right along the 3rd Street area, most likely. The front end will continue to be green, and will be sitting areas and things like that. We're not going to be having basketball courts or playgrounds or things of that nature right there necessarily. And then on the for Plank property, the 25 acres that we would get, the intention is that it would be a passive recreation area as well, with trails, a lot of those elevated so that you can get up above the ground and the water to make sure that you're not harming the wetland areas as you're walking through, very similar to what the conditions are at the Riverwalk in North Muskegon. So we do know that there are environmental concerns there, and that we'll be working through to make sure that those are addressed as we go through that. What is MartDoc's specific purpose with the Fisherman's Landing property? So I think this is kind of a complex question. So the city was the one who really started this conversation in the late 80s when we rezoned the MartDoc property and wanted to have them to start to move their operations to Fisherman's Landing. So much so that as we did changes in the master plan, as we created charter parks and we did all these different things, every time Fisherman's Landing was noted and put aside as a location for future port operations. This has been an objective of the city for 30 years. And at this point in time, we have ownership at West Michigan Dock that is willing to have that conversation and seeing how it works for their business model, and then it works for how the city has envisioned its redevelopment for its community going back decades. So this was a conversation that started at the city level, and MartDoc came to the table and said, you know what, we see the advantage of this. We see how this can work for us. We can see how the redevelopment would be good for the downtown and good for our property in the downtown. And there were a lot of other folks that came to the table as well. The Chamber of Commerce, Grand Valley State University, Parkland Properties, the county, and talked about how do we have this cohesive vision for what Muskegon Lake is going to look like in the future, and how do we work together to make that happen. The linchpin of that, none of that happens if you don't have a redevelopment at MartDoc. And so that necessitates the movement of their port operations to another location. What new job? Where did it go? So I think the question was about what new jobs are going to be created as a result of this. So there's a variety of different jobs that would be created at the port operations itself. You would have some jobs that are called stevedoring jobs that don't require a college education. They do require some special training, but a lot of times, my understanding is if you're working for a port operator, they can help you get scholarships and to help pay for that training. And then you come back and you can really take that anywhere in the country that has port operations. So there'll be a handful of jobs created at the port itself for jobs like stevedoring and support staff and things of that nature. When you look at the GMED study that was done 4 years ago now, and looking at the redevelopment of the downtown property, what you see is that there would be several hundred new jobs that would be created in a variety of different areas, including the service industry, that would generate regionally about $14 million in wages additional beyond what we see right now. There would also be hundreds of construction jobs that would be created as well. And that doesn't include property taxes and income tax that the city would generate as a result of that. Why is there no reverter clause if MartDoc does not move? The way that the agreement is set up, they have the right to purchase or exercise their deed in 2028, and then if the grant process doesn't work, they can make the decision to do the project on their own, so it would take a longer period of time. Our goal is not to duplicate port operations. And there's a trigger in the agreement that says once they commence port operations, and that's movement of goods or movement of stuff in and out of the port, that is when that 5-year window starts ticking on when they have to stop doing port operations at MartDock to ensure that we don't have two port areas going on at the same time. There's also aspects of the agreement that talk about how long a campground has to be maintained, when they're able to cease those type of campground operations, what time of year they're able to do that. They wouldn't be able to do it mid-season, for example. So we do look at how we make for those contingencies. But they would be paying for the property in a property sale, and then when they do that, we would be buying additional property at the Verplank site to move forward with. How much of this will be ADA accessible? So my anticipation would be for the 3rd Street area, it would be very ADA accessible. The Terrace Point Pier that we have now is ADA accessible. I would see it being a continuation of that. The Nature Preserve area, again, we would have decking and things of that nature, much like you have on the North Muskegon side. So looking at how that is done is how I would envision this being done as well. Is there a timeline plus allocated funds from the city for walking paths, restoration, and nature preserves in the Verplank property and the city would acquire? The timeline's a little bit in flux, and the reason the timeline's a little bit in flux for that part of the deal is because it's dependent on a couple of different factors, including a purchase agreement or a purchase option, I should say, that MartDock has on the Verplank property. And then also when would camping cease and how would construction start and things of that nature. So that timeline's a little bit in flux. And then as far as allocated funds, that's something that we would, after the restoration process is taken care of, we would then work through our budget process to accommodate for those types of assets. The restoration, most of that would be done through some grant processes available that we've already identified, again, that are not necessarily federal in nature. There's some ones through the Great Lakes St. Lawrence Seaways Initiative. There's some through the state. There are federal ones as well. But we would, for the restoration, that would a lot of times be done through grants. Could the Fisherman's Landing campground be relocated to the Richards Park property? That was one of the properties that we looked at, to be perfectly honest, and are gonna dig into a little bit more. There's certain things about different properties that are pluses and minuses. One of the pluses of that property, it's close to the current location. It's on the south branch of the river. You can have kayak launches there. There already is a kayak launch, but improved kayak launches. We do have some challenges there with the Ottawa Street Bridge. It's near the causeway and the spider web. So, how does all that work? But that is one of the locations that we've looked at. What is the time frame for the redevelopment of the current MartDock property? So, MartDock would have to cease operations on their site 5 years after they commence operation on the new site. And then redevelopment would occur once those operations have ceased. So they would need to have a PUD approved. The way PUD approvals work is once you have a PUD approved, you have 5 years to complete that project as it is approved. So once they move forward with those, that's how that timeline would work. This is something that, as I've stated in the past, this is a 20-25 year project. It's not something that's going to be done in 5 years. It'll be many, many more years than that before we see what the final product is. How long will it take to finish the CBA? Hopefully not 10 years. The CBA, collective bargaining. Oh, sorry, community benefits agreement. Sorry. I'm doing union negotiations right now, so the community benefits agreement, there isn't a specific community benefits agreement in this document. We've actually only done a community benefits agreement once in the development so far, and that was with the Shaw. That's something that's relatively new in the state of Michigan when you're doing developments. What we're looking at here is really property acquisition through this agreement that would allow us to purchase property, and then we would move forward with with projects in that on those pieces of property. What I would say is that part of the agreement that we have that we're working through with MartDoc as far as the development agreement goes is who's responsible for certain things at Fisherman's Landing regarding, moving the pavilion if it needs to be moved, things like that. What is the contingency plan if the Verplank property is not acquired? So that is addressed in the agreement. And if for some reason the Verplank property doesn't come to fruition, and keep in mind that West Michigan Dock has an option on that property right now. But if for some reason that was to go sideways, we do have the option to, at the commission's discretion, determine if there's other property that we could use for the acquisition to handle the conversion. But that would be a commission decision. I couldn't make that on my own. It would be a discussion that we would have publicly. We don't have any property identified, but it doesn't necessarily have to be the same type of property. We like the Verplank property because it's right next door. It expands our public access to water. It's just a really good option, and it achieves a number of things that we wanted to achieve in the community. But just to kind of give you an example of how conversion works from the DNR perspective, we used to own Chase Hammond Golf Course years and years and years ago. Chase Hammond Golf Course, when we divested ourselves of that, we got the bike trail. So very, very different amenity. So it doesn't have to quite be the same, but we do have contingencies for that. Have forecasts been made on the increase in ships at the new MartDoc? Has the safety of smaller vessels being launched from Fisherman's Landing been analyzed? So Fisherman's Landing, that berth is already an active port. The salt dock is right there. There's been multiple salt ships in this summer. Down in July, I was down there and watched one of the salt ships unload, and there were still boats that were coming and going out of the launch ramp area. So it's an existing condition that is there today. It would just be on the other side. There would not be two ships in dock at the same time. The berth is not wide enough. So the navigation that you have around those vessels would be the same. It's not like you're going to have two ships in there at the same time. So that's an existing condition. As far as forecast for increased ships, I don't have that forecast out the top of my head. I don't think that Chuck and Max have that either. It would be more activity than what we have now, but I think less ship activity than we had when Cobb was operational. Would that be safe?
Yeah, and likely be more barge activity.
Okay. Yeah, so more barge activity, which is a smaller type of vessel than as opposed to ship activity. But if we go back just a couple of years ago when Cobb was still operating, the amount of Lakers that we had in and out of the Muskegon Harbor was higher, much higher than it is today.
Muskegon is the port city. Why not celebrate this and make it a part of downtown?
For years, we have maintained a focus on reclaiming the industrial waterfront of the past to become a national destination for waterfront living and commerce. Significant investment and new projects are important keys to elevating the vibrancy of this community. This project remains consistent with this overall objective.
Why do you not want this on a countywide ballot? It impacts everyone. Why do you not want this on a public ballot? This is too big of an issue for our commissioners to decide. It affects everyone in Muskegon County and our tourists.
All properties in this project are located in the city of Muskegon. The City Commission decided not to put this on the ballot in September of 2025.
How many public comments, emails, etc. to the city are there in support of Fisherman's Landing and Campground? Can you estimate if you don't know?
City Manager's office has received 10 emails in support of the project.
Hartshorn and Fisherman's Landing Campground are similar in that both are city-owned, seasonal, and pay-to-use. If this deal goes through, could a similar fate occur at the marina? Are there any future plans to incorporate Hartshorn?
There are no plans to incorporate Hartshorn Marina or Park. Additionally, Hartshorn is a chartered park, so the city cannot sell it without a vote of approval from Muskegon residents.
Just clarifying, the campground operates for free, limits public access on city land, and makes money from campers without giving any revenue to the city.
Correct. The campground does not provide revenue to the city. However, fees collected for water usage at the campground are deposited into the city's water and sewer fund.
How does the expected property tax revenue of Mart Dock in the new plan compare to current revenues?
That's a hard number to estimate. However, Mart Dock has owned the property and buildings for nearly a century, because increases in property taxes are capped for existing owners. We do know that any new construction on the site would see tax collections at a higher rate. Additionally, all jobs and residents on site would pay income tax to the city as well.
Is Mart Dock revenue sharing in the agreement? Is Mart Dock responsible for revenue sharing regardless of their operations profitability?
Yes, revenue sharing is part of the agreement. It will be based on various factors. The overall percent of revenue sharing will be based on the total amount of grants the company receives.
How will we fund the ongoing costs of 2 new city parks? We are doing the bare minimum at some of our parks now. Why add more? What is the estimated cost of maintenance per park? Will it take away from our current neighborhood parks? Will city taxpayers pay for the upkeep of the fish cleaning station? What will be the maintenance costs of the park if the proposal is approved?
Our city parks are currently undergoing significant investment and improvement. We are committed to this effort. This plan is a response to a long-standing desire from the community to create additional public access to our waterfront. The city is prepared to provide the necessary investments to support our park system and pursue competitive state and federal grant funding to fill any gaps in project funding.
What guarantees are there that the city will receive a grant from the state to purchase the additional property by Fisherman's Landing?
The city will not use state grant funds to purchase the Verplank property to create the nature preserve. The city will use the funds from the sale of a portion of Fisherman's Landing to buy the 25 acres. However, the city has already secured a grant for the 3rd Street area.
Can you clarify the nature of development that will happen on the current Mart Dock property? What developers have firmly committed to building this new housing, and for which economic group is this housing to be built? Can we get an open market concept like Milwaukee with the redevelopment? That brick auditorium building would be perfect.
Mart Dock and its parent company, West Michigan Dock, plan to redevelop the site in the future. The specific type of housing, such as condominiums, mixed-use buildings, or single-family homes, would be determined through the Planning Commission's Planned Unit Development, or PUD, process. No development will happen in the immediate future. This would occur several years down the road. Conceptual draft renderings have shown potential mixed-use development, alongside preservation of the site's historic maritime features.
Why do we need high-end housing there? Is that good for our community? Why do we need high-end housing on the Mart Dock waterfront, eliminating public use?
In 2023, the City of Muskegon partnered with Bowen National Research, a leading housing research firm, to complete a 5-year housing needs assessment. The study found a significant shortage of both for-sale and rental housing across all price points in our community. At the high end, the assessment identified a need for 322 for-sale homes priced at $250,000 or more, and 207 rental units at $2,146 per month or higher. These new homes will help address that need. As of August 2025, roughly halfway through the 5-year aid, the city has made progress, closing 51% of the housing gap identified in the study.
Is there an agreement with Mart Dock and future developers that there would be public access to the waterfront? For example, a path as they develop?
No, these specifics would be decided during the PUD process, but they are not outlined in the agreement, and there's no current zoning or planning requirements in the City of Muskegon for public access.
Why not just rezone the Mart Dock area to make it easier than getting rid of the campground?
This conversation began in the late 1980s. when the city rezoned the Mart Dock property to prevent expansion there. At the time, the city planned for Mart Dock to move its operations to Fisherman's Landing to consolidate port activities, which is why Fisherman's Landing was not designated a charter park. Today, Mart Dock West Michigan Dock is open to adjusting its operations, exploring downtown redevelopment and supporting a plan that benefits the waterfront and downtown. Partners such as Grand Valley State University, the Chamber of Commerce, Parkland Properties, and the county are involved in making this vision possible. None of this can happen without moving port operations from downtown, which is why Mart Dock is the linchpin connecting all waterfront development. Their specific purpose is to relocate their port and shipping operations to the Fisherman's Landing area.
We are third in the state for bass tournaments. Can we accommodate parking for tournaments? Have you spoken with tournament officials about these changes?
There are multiple large parking lots within a mile radius. We have not spoken with tournament officials about the changes, but we are happy to work with them to find solutions.
What does Verplunk get out of the deal?
Verplank receives the revenue from the sale of their property.